Here we are. We are live at Chargeheads UK YEV channel. YEV.
Why not?
Exactly. And this is where we're going to find out why not. And we're going to be talking specifically around charging today. And I've got my helpful team. Well, we are the team, Kevin and Alex. And where should we start, chaps? What do you reckon?
I think really maybe talking about the recent article that I think all of us read in the Times about charging and how a Nissan Leaf was more expensive than a fueled car.
Yeah, let's hear what the legacy media have got to say. Very unbiased channel. So, Kev, take us through it.
So basically, it's someone did a trip in a Nissan Leaf using entirely public charging. And so it worked out more expensive, but obviously it's taking the worst case scenario of comparing it to the best case scenario. And we, in the idea of being balanced is the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, that yes, public charging is expensive, but the times you'd actually take a trip and do it purely on public charging is very rare. For example, this week I went to Warwick. Most of the trip was done there was public charging involved, but that was quite expensive. But obviously most of the charging was at my off-peak rate. So actually when you average it out, it's not too bad. But I think we do need to be honest and say that public charging can be expensive. And if you haven't got a driveway and you could only public charge, it would be quite expensive to run an EV.
Yeah, and this is what really annoys me is the fact that, they take an example which is clearly going to work in the advantage of whatever the message that they're pushing. And Nissan Leaf, I mean, let's be realistic. At best, when it was new, it was like 100 miles during the summer. And if they're probably taking an older Nissan Leaf, which has the worst battery degradation because it doesn't have thermally managed batteries, so the battery degradation is bad. So realistically, it's probably like 40, 50 miles. So, of course, if you're doing what was the length of journey, Kev?
Trying to remember the exact one then.
Because you're going to be charging that car a lot on a long journey. And sorry, what was the mileage, mate? Did you say
I'm just going to find that now.
Yeah, you have a look. So basically, as I probably mentioned in a video recently, actually, which I put on my TikTok, I think it's horses for courses. If you do a lot of short journeys, then Nissan Leaf is probably quite good because you can get one, pick them up for like $3,000 now, or a Renault Zoe. Great. But if you're doing like decent mileage, then you need to double your money and got to like $7.5 grand. Start looking at MG ZS, MG5, I don't know, Hyundai Ioniq, Golf E, where you've got decent, range, and you don't have to worry about charging so much, and the charging's quicker, and all these other things. So I think it's all about getting, as we try to do in this podcast, a challenge, a balanced view.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those, isn't it, where at the moment there's kind of a bias in the market in terms of at the moment, if you've got a driveway or a garage, you've got somewhere to charge it, you're more likely to be. It's one less barrier, isn't it, to going electric? You can certainly go EV these days with quite a lot of the new cars and survive on public charging, but you do miss out on kind of the key cost and convenience benefits of having an EV, which is that you can plug in at home overnight. And I mean, we here are, I guess we're in a position where I did this up the other week, is that we are on a flat rate off-gem cap tariff at the moment. We probably will get solar and battery storage at some point and go on a tariff that has different rates on it. We also have a relatively inefficient EV. The Rifter, as much as I talk it up, is not the best for efficiency on the market.
Saw one in the car park today, mate. Thinking of you.
A friend.
A friend.
But at 3.2 miles per kilowatt hour on our current tariff, we're looking at about 7 or 8p per mile on our current rates. We can do it cheaper, but even so, that's still half what we'd be paying on a petrol or our old petrol car. And obviously we also get the convenience of I never get handed the keys and go, oh, can you go and put some fuel in the family car? It's always charged. But I appreciate as well that if you haven't got that, it can obviously be significantly more expensive. If you're relying on public charging and you're not in a position to leave a car for several hours at a time, say in a shopping mall or a restaurant or a workplace, obviously if you're then relying on kind of short splash and dash, the best place to go for that is Tesla chargers. So if you can find it, if you've got one locally that's open, the prices on those are significantly cheaper and they're good, robust infrastructure. It could be, I mean, almost the best part of four times pricier than I'm paying here, and even and the price difference gets even bigger if you're then comparing it to people who can charge overnight.
No, exactly. And what I wanted to highlight, hello, commuter branch line. Yeah, so what I wanted to mention is I'm glad we started at this point, because I wanted to talk about home charging and AC charging and charging without driveway, because I think the main factor really is, if you've got a driveway, in my opinion, there really isn't any excuse to start saving money about having an electric car, unless you're a petrol head, for argument's sake, and you can only have one car, and you like the noise, you like going through the gears, you like, you live and breathe wanting a V8. Oh, fair enough. I'm a petrol head, and I get it. However, people that don't care about cars, that aren't petrol heads, then you can really start saving a serious amount of money, and just don't believe the bollocks. Essentially, that's what it is. It's bollocks. It's out there.
Yeah, I've just found it. They actually looked at a trip from London to Penzance, and they didn't even do it in an EV. They did it on a purely paper exercise of 308 miles, and they worked out it would cost £178 compared to 77 in a diesel. So they're basically going by WLTP figures, maybe, of a Nissan Leaf, an early one. But it's like 308 miles. So yeah, okay, I couldn't do 308 miles in my Ioniq 5 in a single charge. But 200 of those miles, and this is even if I did 70 down the motorway, which is quite hard to do 70 down the motorway these days because there's so many roadworks and stuff like that. You're talking just shy of 200 miles, because it's about 3.6 miles per kilowatt hour. So you're talking only 100 of those miles would be at that more expensive rate. But because I'm on an off-peak tariff, most of it would be at 8.5 pence a kilowatt hour.
I reckon I can count. Sorry.
No, you go, mate. You go.
I was going to say, I reckon I can count on the fingers of probably of one hand the number of times I've filled up with fuel at a motorway service area. And if you talk to people about the reasons, obviously, why you would do that, you go, well, you wouldn't pay, you'd refuel before the trip because it's it's significantly cheaper. You'd never do that unless it was like an emergency and you were worried about running out of fuel. Obviously, there's more necessity to pay those higher prices if you're in an EV because the range is that bit shorter. And for convenience sake, generally speaking, the shortest detour is going to be a motorway service area or something just off the motorway where you're going to be paying those higher prices potentially. But equally, it balances out through the year in that, yeah, you might pay more for those journeys, but then for the other, 350 whatever days of the year where you're only doing local journeys and you're charging at home, it's if you can do that, then it's the balance is that you're more than tipping that the other way, aren't you?
I think what really pisses me off is the fact that, yeah, like I said earlier, it's a no-brainer if you've got a driveway, but we've got all these things coming in from the government, that have been moved around, the bans and stuff like that. I don't think they should be doing any of that sort of stuff, or ZEV mandates or any of that stuff, unless they're actually working on the charging infrastructure, because the charging infrastructure isn't ideal for anyone that hasn't got a driveway. What are they doing about home charging? They're not doing anything. They're doing sweet FA. And this is what really, really, really annoys me, is the fact that the government are pushing and pushing a lot of the OEMs, which are having loads of trouble, and they're going to be losing a lot of money. But what actually are the government doing? They're doing nothing. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are seeing anything. Yeah, okay, there's a grant you can get if you put a little, for a gully charging lead. So basically what you can get is there's something called a Turbo Charge. There's other ones as well where you can put a gully in your pavement if you've got a terraced house. Bear in mind, not everyone's got a terraced house. Some people have got flats, and they put money towards that. I think it's about 350 quid. And that will allow you to charge on enough off-peak rate. But they're not really doing anything else. Oh, are they doing charging, local charging? Yeah, they are. But my local chargers, they're like 54 pence per kilowatt hour. And guess what? They're all bloody broken, aren't they? It's just so frustrating, the fact that they haven't done anything about it, which, you know, really frustrates me, where people that have got driveways can absolutely take advantage of the prices of used EVs, the range, the cost, the lack, you know, the cheaper servicing. It just blows my mind that more people aren't taking advantage of it who have got driveways.
And that's the thing, isn't it? The government's done a little bit with the, as you mentioned, the home charge grant. Now you can claim the old home charge rate if you're to install a charging point for a space outside your house, but it doesn't allow you to reserve that space. The space has to not obstruct, that parking outside your property has to not obstruct traffic, obviously. And also, the rules for treading cables across pavements are set locally. So you might actually find that your local authority doesn't allow it. Some do, some don't. So even if you have a gully or whatever, it might be that your local council says, no, we're not permitting you to install it. And you actually have to get the gully installed before you can claim the charging grant. So the whole thing is incredibly difficult, and needlessly so. How difficult would it be to set centrally a set of rules where you go, because as it stands, there's no set rules for it at all, and it's all done by local council. So in terms of what requirements you've got in terms of gullies and covering them up with those plastic things, is not set. Or you can some that are not even bothered if you just trail cables, as long as you kind of try not to have them as a bit of trip hazard, like a waist height across the pavement or whatever. Why not, as central government, set a set of rules and go, yes, you can have a home charger outside your house as long as you do this, 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 and this, and then just streamline the whole thing and standardise it across the country. Even that's just helping it along, isn't it?
Alex, I'll tell you why they've not done it. It's because they've got no plan whatsoever. They've not planned this through. They're just thinking, oh, do you know what? We need to change. We need to change the emissions. Electric cars the way. Which, yes, that's a large part of it. But it's a bit like, and I'm getting quite passionate about this because it's something that I do now professionally from the EV transition software that we do. It's just there's literally no planning at all. They've not thought about it. They've not thought about the infrastructure. They've just gone, okay, well, yeah, we'll do a bit of that. We'll do a bit of that. There's no one really that is, focused on making it work. It needs to work. How are they going to do it? How are we going to get electric cars? Oh, shit. That's all right. It's only a daddy on this. Sorry, it fell from the sky. Better than the lightning that's going to, touch my head at the moment. I nearly got struck by lightning out there. I don't know if anyone's had lightning thunder. But it's just, honestly, I'm so frustrated with the fact that there's so much more that can be done. So much more.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Sorry, go on, Kev.
That's the thing. It's difficult. That what we've got to be careful of is this EV transition could make it a very two-tiered society for those who have driveway, who can take a massive advantage of it. Yeah. And generally those in terraced houses, which are generally in areas where there's less wealth and stuff, are going to be worse off than the people who are in areas where you've got a driveway, generally a bigger house with a driveway, and you make more of a saving. And I think, is the answer maybe in those areas some sort of social tariff for EV charging? If there's areas where they can do that, is there something where you can make it so it is equitable for people who have driveways?
Here we go. So Roland Moore, we got perhaps just like a clunk clip every trip. Some of us will remember that when seatbelts became mandatory, there needs to be some education to clear the FUD. Absolutely, mate. 100%.
Yeah, but I think we do need to be honest with that and say it's not, as we said, it's not perfect for charging yet. Charging across the pavement, as we've said, it's local authority based. But how often do you get to actually park outside your own house?
This is true. Very, very true. And I know that they've got the lamppost charging, which is becoming more and more popular, and there's shared charging and stuff like that. But where's the information just isn't out there, and it's just been completely drowned out by all the crap that's talking no, EVs aren't going to make it. And there's loads of people out there that are willing just to poo everything simply because it looks like Kevin's. Oh, he's back again.
Yeah, my camera's not coming back, which is weird.
That's right, mate. We know you're there in person. Yeah, it's correct. So yeah, it just annoys me, and the fact that they've not done anything about public charging and the tax on it, because obviously the tax on public charging is 20%, and there's big fighting for the to bring that down to 5%, which will make a bit of a difference. I mean, all the public charging that's non-Tesla is 85 pence per kilowatt as a general rule of thumb. I mean, I have seen cheap ones out there, maybe 67p, something like that, which makes it a bit more palatable. But obviously, you really need to be charging at home to make it work. And that's why I'm so passionate about the infrastructure being right for everyone. Like Kevin, I think you mentioned as well, Alex, the fact that it is causing a divide. And that's the last thing we want. We've got enough division going on in this society, that is for sure. Love my EV, haven't charged from home yet. We have our own driveway, just lucky. Absolutely. I think my dad, who commented earlier about the charger protector across the pavement, I don't think he's ever charged his car publicly, maybe once, and he's had his car nearly 4 years. So it just goes to show that there's that how much of a benefit that is. George, who was on last week, who joins us sometimes, lamppost charging has issues, I've been told by local council. Okay, well, it doesn't even need to be that much. I mean, even if it's like 3 kilowatts, I mean, I think that would do most people. Oppo, I don't think I've seen you before, mate. So thanks for joining in. The Dutch have many street chargers. Going there next month to see what it's like. Please share. Hashtag Chargeheads UK or what have you. That'd be great to see, mate.
Yeah, I think most of the issue with lamppost charging, though, is the way our lampposts are configured in the UK. So if you're in any sort of new build housing estate, you'll notice that the lampposts are set at the back of the pavement, not the front of the pavement. So actually, it's not practical because you'll have a massive trailing cable. So you may as well have one of the curb-based solutions and try and plug into a lamppost, because people will be careless plugging into a lamppost, and there'll be just this massive trip hazard across the pavement.
I mean, I've seen pictures where everyone's plugged into a lamppost charger, and it's not exactly pretty. And the argument would be, ideally we'd have some wireless charging. To be honest, I mean, obviously it would cost a load of money, but let's be honest, the UK needs to dig up 90% of the roads anyway. So maybe they're waiting for that.
Fill potholes with wireless charging pads.
There'd be plenty of charging then there, wouldn't there? So yeah. It's just a massive frustration of mine, this AC charging, massive. But yeah, no, going on to the rapid charging, I mean, I think we're past the point. I don't know if you agree, chaps, but there is enough public charging out there. I think there probably is. I think there's only a few pockets now, maybe in Wales, Scotland, and Cornwall, where there isn't enough public charging. So, okay, the cost is one element. And I think George actually mentioned it in our WhatsApp a little while ago. If it costs more, okay, we're trying to save the environment. I say save the environment. I think it's more, for me, it's more about, reducing, pollution really in cities and stuff. But, there are a lot of benefits and financial benefits of having an EV. But who's to think, that those benefits financially might actually increase by the end of October? I've got my money on that it will, but yeah, I'm angry about it. Can everyone tell?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's especially as interesting sort of filling up with fuel. Looking back at the price of fuel hasn't changed significantly over the last 4 years or so. I mean, there's been some fluctuations but generally speaking, it's been about level. And you look at that compared to the cost of charging, and the cost of charging has gone up. So, I mean, it's come back down a lot, but it's also the cost of charging has gone up, especially in public, significantly in that time. I mean, I remember the good old days of going around the old electric highway points, and they were free to use, and hoping that the guy in the Outlander who got there before you would unplug and let you on, which quite often they did, to be fair.
Alex, no one's old enough to remember that.
I remember the first electric car we had when my wife had a Renault Zoe. We have had an electric highway charging point probably 2 miles from the house. The first 2 years, that Renault Zoe never got charged at home, even though we had a home charger, because it was free to charge it at the motorway services. So we used to do that. And it's still at 98.8% state of health after 2 years of rapid charging.
I remember before the car, I had this lovely horse, and all you had to do was stop for lunch. It would eat some grass, and then you carry on your journey. It was fantastic. It didn't cost you anything, but you wouldn't take it to the desert because it just wouldn't work. But, but this is the thing, you know, how long? I think it's probably been a good 2 years of real EV, you know, infrastructure going in, but it's still you look at see what's out there at the moment. It's still all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Although there are a hell of a lot more electric cars on the road now, so it must be working for a lot of people. So you know,
I would imagine. Sorry.
There you go, mate.
The range has got bigger, isn't it? So that's the thing, isn't it? The range has got bigger. So I actually used public charging less than when I first had an EV. And then now, I mean, take an example. I drove down from Swansea to Tenby. When we first started doing that, you could just about make it in a Renault Zoe there and back in the summer. And there were no chargers en route. And I drove there now, and there's loads of, like, I've seen Osprey chargers and all the different brands. And now I don't need them because actually I can easily do that trip there and back without charging. So
there we go. My dad's just put an advert out there pretty much saying that EVs are perfect for retired people with a driveway because they don't do many miles, and and quite a lot of the time the retired people have got loads of money, so they're retired. So they've got a driveway. Anyway, that's just me just rabbiting on. Foppo, not that long ago, drove a turbo diesel, a quarter tank, over 30 quid, and it got scary. Used many years ago LPG, and that was cheap. A VW Jetta, my dad's car, which I used for 5 years. Yeah, LPG used to be cheap. That's not cheap anymore. There's hardly any place that do LPG actually. But yeah, it just boggles my mind that like more people don't take advantage of it. Oh, Popo is also retired with loads of money. So there we go. Have an EV if you're retired and you've got loads of money.
We're all doing it wrong then, aren't we? We've all got EVs and we're not retired.
No, we should be. We should be. Maybe you can retire early if you've got an EV though. So because you're saving money. So there, yeah, one of them. What do you think should be changing? I mean, I personally think the government needs to start doing more infrastructure, for more cheaper AC infrastructure. I don't know about you guys. What have you seen charging infrastructure, AC charging around? Because the cheapest I've got around here is like 54p. Have you guys seen anything cheaper than that?
Well, I know that stuff I've been involved in, putting AC chargers in, that it's actually still, because there's no capped energy rate for businesses, to actually do it less than 45 pence a kilowatt hour is virtually impossible without making a loss. Because by the time you take into account standing charges, which in some cases you absorb them because you're using that for your business anyway. But the other thing is, like you said, you see loads that are broken. If you add a maintenance cost because you want them fixed when they're there, plus you've got the 20% VAT that you've got to charge rather than 5%, you're thinking actually you can't make money on AC charging at below 45 pence. You are making a loss because it's just that expense. So they need to do something maybe around the VAT on AC charging or something like that.
Yes.
Just so because you're not a CPO, you're not providing the service in the same way, and you're actually it's just a socket, isn't it? You get below the sort of technology. A Type 2 is just a fancy socket for charging a car. There's not really any clever stuff apart from doing the activation on it.
Well, George has put cheaper grazing charge at destinations, and what I think he means by that, and this is what I was just about to mention actually, is the fact that actually the reason why a lot of this charging is so expensive publicly is because it's over 8 kilowatts, and once something's over 8 kilowatts, you have to have the tap and pay now. Any new one has to have the tap and pay, which then puts the money up because you've got to have the software, you've got to have the tap and pay machine. So the way that I see it, to make EV infrastructure cheaper and bring the cost down, it's just to have a load of 7 kilowatt chargers out there. You know, don't have them with a cable on, because no doubt some robbers are just going to nick the cables or cut them off or something like that. Just cheap and cheerful. Okay, you might need an app for it, but minimize the number of apps. Maybe have a standard, like there's one app and it talks to all the other ones. That shouldn't be too difficult. the amount of software out there in AI at the moment. So have AC charger, 7 kilowatt, you have an app, bang, and it's, 3.5 kilowatts. Everyone like, pops in if you need to. And if you do need a faster charge, then yes, you need to pay more expensive prices. But I think that is the way that they should be doing it. No one needs to pay an extra 20p for 11 kilowatts. Everyone can charge overnight. Just more lower power AC charging everywhere. I think that is the answer, personally.
Yeah, I mean, but going back to, that's reminding me of one bit you said about maybe government should do legislation centrally for it. But that's kind of one of my bugbears, is the legislation they have done around destination versus rapid charging. Because the 8 kilowatt thing is one of my big bugbears. Because actually what they should have done is done a differential between DC charging and AC charging.
That's a good shout.
Because actually, with a 3-phase circuit, I've got, example, I put loads of chargers in, which I'd have to derate to make them public, because they're 22 to benefit the business. Because actually, you think a lot of cars, I mean, my car does 11 kilowatt charging. I'm guessing your Tesla, does that do 11 kilowatts?
11, yeah.
So actually, that's quite an advantage. And actually, when I've been putting chargers in, a 22 kilowatt charger, if you've got 3-phase supply, doesn't cost any more than a 7 kilowatt charger. It's just on 3-phase. And if you try and do an 11 kilowatt one, you end up with 3 kilowatts on single phase. So I think they really should have thought about that and actually made the differential between
That's a really good shout.
AC and DC charging.
Yeah, really good shout. Antonia's got a 2020 long range Model 3. It's a very good choice, as my dad's saying. I agree. You don't have to worry about charging, and you've got the most convenient electric car going. It's probably one of the best. Not that Kevin or Alex might agree with me, because need a BT home hub equivalent with a system to share home chargers, e.g. on Opta, Electroverse, set your driveway as available, and while I'm away, someone else could use it. Absolutely. Because that, although I've never got a free driveway, but I think a lot of people could really take advantage of that. Neighbour a couple of doors down, he hasn't even got a car. He's got 2 driveway spaces. That'd be a perfect thing. Maybe I'll mention it to him next time. He doesn't talk much.
I was going to say, Co-Charger, there's a company called Co-Charger that lets you share your home charger. Then the AFP, the Association of Fleet Professionals, are looking at doing that with fleets, particularly largely vans, but cars as well. And I think as well, I mean, I wonder if the solution where you've got rows of terraced houses, I mean, as we've got in the valleys and stuff up here, and also in the middle of Cardiff, where you could have all the homes could have a charging point. You don't necessarily use the one that's attached to your house, but you then get credited with the there's a central system that manages those, and you get credited, your energy that's used off your bill gets credited back to you. And I don't know how feasible that is, but that then gives you something to anchor those points too, doesn't it?
You could just ask ChatGPT 4.0 and it will tell you exactly how to do it. They're obviously the government haven't actually found AI yet. They're too busy working out, the holes in the budget. Good shout. This is the first time I've heard the issue discussed before. Very interesting. Thank you, John. And that's why we want to talk about it, because we want to talk about the things that matter, and charging is a key part of the electric transition. So yeah, I mean, the co-charging, great idea. I think fantastic point, Kevin. Cheaper for AC, more expensive to DC. And I think maybe there's not so much Tesla, because I've got one of those. I want to keep it cheap. But like the faster charging, 100, 200, 400, not that many cars can take it. They should like up the cost, maybe, depending on the station. So like, do you know what? I don't want to pay that much. Do you know what? I'm happy to go and have lunch, have a coffee, go to the toilet. I'll put it in 100 kilowatts. I don't have to pay as much. I'm only paying like 65 pence, because the faster chargers are more expensive. That would make sense. Although saying that, they have put a lot of the infrastructure in already, and the faster chargers are getting cheaper, and they're putting out even faster chargers. But like I said, most cars can't take more than 200 kilowatts anyway. So yeah.
Sorry.
I had a similar experience with that some cars charge too fast, because I stopped at one of the chargers on the way back from Warwick, and I didn't want to put a particularly large amount of electricity in because I didn't need it, because they've now done a software update on the Ionic where it tells you what percentage you need to go to your destination. So the new sat nav, it does similar to a lot of cars, so it'll tell you how long you need to be on there, and
Sorry, Kev, Tesla's always had that, just saying.
All right. But yeah, the problem was that I plugged into a 350 kilowatt charger, and the Ioniq 5 can charge quite quickly because it's 800 volts. And I found myself rushing my Subway sandwich because I didn't want to pay for too much electricity, because it was like, oh, I can see it is going up too quickly.
Absolutely. And this is another thing about charging, sorry, Alex, to cut in there, is the fact that you don't need to charge it up to 100%. First of all, it'll take you ages anyway. But having that function that Kevin just mentioned, that the Tesla Model 3 that I've had always had it, I don't know when they brought it in on Model S or what have you, is you can charge to the point where you're like, okay, yep, it's done. You can get to your destination, which is probably going to be home, which is then going to be like a tenth of the price. Honestly, that function is a game changer for people that haven't got a Tesla.
Yep, Tesla's had that. Tesla's had that since I drove the first one that I had on test back in 2014. So yeah, they were really ahead of the game in that sort of stuff. Tesla as well does the queuing thing. I always say this is one of those things that doesn't get shouted about enough, is because they own the entire ecosystem. They're able to they know which cars are going past which charging points at what time and roughly how much charge they'll have left. And they're then able to go, well, don't stop at this one because you might have to wait. Stop at the next one. And they're actually alleviating bottlenecks through big data as well, which I think is fascinating. And it was I think it was part of the presentation where they were talking about gigacasting and other bits and pieces. And it was one of those bits that I was like, that's really clever. That's really useful tech. And it's kind of got lost in the hype of other bits and pieces that kind of all bubble to the top. And I think that's one of those things that's really useful.
It's simple, but it's really, really effective. For the Mondeo of the electric world. When I will use a fast charger, I need time on the motorway, half an hour minimum. I want a coffee and something to eat in peace. Well, me, 10 minutes. I've timed it because I'm that sad, because I'm an EV nerd. Is the fact that it takes me 10 minutes to go to the toilet, grab a coffee, and if I've got a fast, I don't know, if I'm getting 200 kilowatts, that will get me at least sort of 80-ish to 100 miles, which is plenty. At last, the next time I need to go to the toilet and coffee. That's funny that superchargers are getting too fast. So ironic when you got all the petrol heads moaning about charging speeds. I don't think it's just the petrol heads, but obviously I think it's majority of the petrol heads. You're probably right there, John. But I think it's the fact that they're so passionately against EVs. They're the ones that are creating most of the bollocks, really. When I know multiple petrol heads, and there's two here that are very much on the EV train. So,
I think generally speaking, the public would if they actually experienced what it's like to do a long trip in an EV, would find the charging experience and the range of them quite agreeable without necessarily even needing to go for the longest range stuff on the market or even the fastest charging stuff on the market. You've got quite a lot of cars now that can do that kind of. If you think in the UK, as much as people will tell you otherwise, and as Kevin was saying earlier, doing 70s actually for any length of time, unless you're driving in the middle of the night, is really quite difficult anyway. Your gaps between, even if you're doing sort of 100, 150 miles per between charges, you're probably still looking at 2 to 3 hours worth of driving, aren't you? So
yeah, because I wanted to do the test on mine, and it did 3.6, 3.7 at 70 miles an hour, which even with the smaller battery Ioniq, you're talking that's 194 miles between charges. So it's like you wouldn't do that normally. That's a good number of hours there. And obviously there's road works and stuff, so you couldn't sustain 70 on it. I did have someone on my LinkedIn posting about, well, it's no good because everyone needs to drive at 80. And it's like, what do you mean everyone needs to? I've commented back, you don't drive at 80 in the UK. There's a 70 mile an hour limit. If you drove everywhere at 80, you're likely to not be driving anywhere very far in a few months' time by the time you've racked up all those points on your license.
So you'd be very surprised at what average speed a car, if you've never actually looked at it, you just assume you get from A to B down the motorway at 70. The reality is probably somewhere more like 55, 60 miles per hour, really, in the UK.
To keep it balanced, I just get really annoyed because I feel like I'm waving the Tesla flag again, guys. I'm really sorry, but what really annoys me is the fact that although this is changing, I'll explain how it's changing in a minute. There's a massive difference between charging on a Tesla charger and a public charger. But bearing in mind, a lot of the chargers still, you need to have the app, and not all of them are tap and pay, because most of the ones that are not tap and pay are pre-November last year, because there wasn't a standard. But from November last year, December, there was a standard where you had to have tap and pay. You don't have to connect to an app. Otherwise, they couldn't put it in. Now, the good news is the end of, I think it's November, every single charger has to have tap and pay, which isn't really helpful. Sorry, say again, mate.
And fines, they get fined massive amounts of money for not having it as well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now, that is great from a usability point of view, because that's a bit of a bugbear of mine on public charging, which isn't Tesla. Because Tesla, you just plug it in and it works, because that's how Tesla charging works. Is you just got your app connected to your wallet, and it just takes the money. And also the fact that it doesn't take, quite a lot of these public chargers take 70 quid or 50 quid and then start charging, which is a bit of a bugbear of mine as well. But like you said, they are changing the tap and pay, which is great. So I think that will make a big difference for everything to be tap and pay. But it does put the price up, because it puts the price up for the infrastructure people. And also there's another thing, anything that's over 50 kilowatts, there has to be a level of service and maintenance, because if they don't have a hotline and they don't get a certain percentage of reliability, they get fined. So that's another thing that's probably going to add on to the cost, because all these things, service and maintenance, tap and pay, they all cost money. So I don't see there's any, again, talking about the government not helping. They're not helping. Yes, okay, it's going to help usability, it's going to help that, but financially it's not going to help. And a lot of the time, that's what gets thrown back at the EV crowd. And the people that are hurt, again, are the people that don't have the driveway. And this is why it's so key that driveway AC charging is sorted out, and people have that resource to plug in and charge their car cheaply.
It's interesting what you're saying about that. Is I was listening to a panel discussion at the EV Summit. I couldn't make the event myself this year, but caught up with it on LinkedIn. Quite an interesting one about how you achieve those standards in terms of charging. And I think it was someone from Mer was saying about effectively it's in charging networks' interests to achieve it. It's 99% reliable uptime throughout across as an average across the year. And again, there's fines if you don't meet that. And they're saying it's already in our interest. This is expensive infrastructure to put in place. If it doesn't work, they're not making money. So effectively, we're effectively being incentivized to keep this stuff online. All that you do by fining people is potentially end up with an additional cost, as you were saying, which then gets passed on to the end user in the end. So,
John, we were talking about lamp post chargers before, so watch it back, buddy, because we did talk about it. But yeah, it all stems from AC charging. It's hitting it at the source, and then that's going to reduce the need on public charging, the expense, and all the rest of it. There are good things going in. There's plenty of coverage now, but it's still not quite there. And I know this is a transition. It's not an Amazon delivery. Do you know what I mean? I know that's what we used to, and this is what I think a lot of people aren't taking into consideration, that it does take time. But I don't personally see there's much progress going on with the AC charging for the people that don't have, which is like 50% of the population, if not more, that don't have that driveway. It's absolutely key. Absolutely key.
Yeah, I think actually going back to the point earlier that someone mentioned about, could it be linked to, you have a load of chargers linked to something like an electriverse card? Well, actually, if you look at a lot of the stuff, a lot of the power companies do use the Kraken back-end software from Octopus. So you think that's got to be something that could be doable, where you have an electriverse card, you just tap that, and that just says that's going on your tariff. There's got to be a way of doing that. And I think that could actually solve a lot of problems.
All home and workplace chargers have had to be connected, data enabled since 2022, haven't they? So everything that's gone in since at homes and workplaces has had to have connectivity built in, with the ability to remotely start, stop, and defer charging sessions, and also to monitor usage remotely. So from that perspective, the groundwork is already there to have, that kind of shared, access to this infrastructure. It's just enabling it, I guess. Finding a way to enable it. I mean, guess the whole thing with what's the system called? Plug and Charge, where they're talking about doing this with CCS is going to help in terms of bringing things in line with Tesla. That will mean that all vehicles where they've got the CCS standard will be able to do the same thing that you mentioned about with the supercharger network, where you just turn up, plug in, and don't have a card. Yeah. Obviously, it's going to be a whole legacy fleet of vehicles that are not compatible with that, and you need to cater for them too.
Yeah, I because on VWs, they change their internet code all the time, which is a bit of an issue. Yeah, but sorry, what are you going to say, mate?
Because a lot of that plug-in and charge is quite basic. The way it's done, it's just on MAC address, because every car has a MAC address for its network.
That's what I'm saying. Some cars it changes all the time, the MAC address. Against the registration number, which is quite frustrating on certain things. I'm sure it's the VAG group, dodgy VAG people, Alex.
Saying nothing.
Nothing like a standard that's not supposed to change, like MAC address, which changes.
It's something that I think might be worth touching upon, actually, with all this, it's all connected. This might be for the tinfoil hat brigade. They might love a bit of this, is the fact that, well, you could argue it is potential, is the fact that it is all connected. And are the government going to try and start taxing us for charging at home?
I wouldn't be surprised. But there's so many ways around it. Well, if they can monitor usage, then in theory they can track. But equally, the other side of that is that if you wanted to get around that, there's nothing stopping you from buying something like a juice charger, which is to explain to those who don't know, that's a system where it's a 22 kilowatt unit where you've got interchangeable ends, so you can plug into the kind of the blue and red sockets like you find at caravan sites and industrial buildings and so on. I mean, if it was going to be a case of charging on the per kilowatt hour basis, you're either going to have a great market for 10-year-old polar chargers like I've got sat out the back of mine.
I was thinking this.
Or sockets,
just use the granny charger.
Yeah. So there's so many ways around that. It's a bit like I don't understand. There's all this talk of road charging, and I don't really see how that's ever going to come in the speed at which people keep saying that it's they're going to introduce road charging. Well, they've already got a system that effectively does that, because they're charging you VAT on charging either at home or on the road, and they're charging you fuel duty on the petrol you buy in the forecourt. That's effectively a per mile tax for using the roads, isn't it?
Well, the fact that Elon is not towing the line with most of the rubbish that's going on at the moment, in my opinion, then I think that's pretty doubtful that that'll happen with Teslas. If they have MAC addresses, that seems something that could be hacked and changed. You could get free charging. Like the sound of that. Get free charging.
The other side of that is, I guess, you then run the risk that people will stop using their home chargers, plug into a 3-pin socket, and you end up with risks of kind of, if you've got old fires and if you're using old plug sockets. I mean, the sockets here around me are fine. They're relatively new. I still wouldn't use them for an overnight charge on an EV9 or something like that. I think I'd feel a bit worried about doing that. But people will, if it's that, or if it's that needed to save money, people will do it, won't they?
I do like to try and predict these things and try and get ahead of the game. I don't always get it right. But it would be nice to be right on certain. It's like the polar charger you mentioned. I think there's going to be a good market for that, because I reckon that they are going to bring in something like that. Whether they can monitor it from your smart meter. We can see that it's taking 7 kilowatt. That's clearly a car. Something's taking 3 kilowatt. That's clearly a car. Thinking ahead that actually, what's the way to do it? Okay, is it a question of getting a battery, getting solar, try and minimize it that way? I would love to explore this subject a bit more. Has anyone who's watching at the moment explored that, or thought about how they could potentially dodge a future, tax from the government? Because I reckon it's got to be coming in. Because let's be honest, they tax this for flipping everything, and it's pretty scary what I hear on what they potentially could be taxing this for in October. So yeah, it's a way of trying to get out of literally. Try and be a Robin Hood for the charging community on reducing the tax. Maybe, I don't know.
I think it would be quite tricky to do anything. I mean, even if with the smart home meters. I mean, we have a ours is one of the earlier ones, and we've got ours plugs in through a micro USB cable, which is fragile and a bit junk. So our smart meter turns off quite regularly and then catches up when we plug it in the next time around. If you wanted to do that, you just plug it in for 5 minutes a day, charge, and then just let it average out through the day and just go, no, I'm just cooking a lot of cakes.
There we go. Top tip: cook cakes.
Cook lots of
eat them before they knock on the door.
I mean, the thing is, I guess things like that might use AI to predict patterns and stuff like that. But at the moment, you want to balance the grid, so EVs can be a solution to that. Because you think about Octopus offering you free electricity. That's that carrot. So I've charged every time on the free electricity hours because it's free. So you can manipulate people's kind of money is a big manipulator of people, as you can see. If you offer something for free, people will do it. So I think it's too soon to do that, because actually, what percentage of the market is EVs at the moment? It's still, it's not a huge one. I walk around my housing estate, I can count probably 20, 30 EVs on a housing estate of 600 houses with probably 2 cars in each drive. So it's still it's too soon to start hammering. Like the per mile thing is one of those things. You could argue that will the improvements in air quality and the reductions in costs to the NHS and everything like that, because of those air quality improvements, cancel out that. So actually, you don't need to have as much tax take from that. And I can see potentially more toll motorways like you have in Europe, so people can choose to take those routes if they want.
I think the other thing that's worth noting on that is people are, and I've been told this repeatedly, that generally speaking, motorists are quite motivated by the costs that they see in a very obvious lump sum kind of a way. Fuel economy, VED, things like that. But during the height of the diesel phase, you'd have lots of people who would be paying more for a diesel to get better fuel economy and cheaper road tax, when actually on a whole life cost basis, they'd be better off in a petrol car. But because they see that they're getting 55, 60 miles per gallon instead of 40, 45 miles per gallon, they kind of go, well, I want the diesel one. And, so the thing that you say about the kind of the cheaper charging and cheaper AC charging, it's going to be a big motivator. I think that people will see that they're paying less, and they'll kind of, they'll get a sense that they're saving money. And it's quite an important part of that process.
Those diesel owners that don't do more than 12,000 miles a year and didn't factor in the DPF recharge cost, where your DPF filter gets clogged up and you have to pay £500 every 6 months. Probably didn't think of that. But there we go. We've got a little message in here from John. The government needs to remember, as well as all the anti-EVs, that the primary reason for switching to EV are the environmental and health reasons. Absolutely. New estate down the road has put shared EV charge points by each parking space, and I do see a lot of that. But how much are those per kilowatt, Mr. A? That's something to do some homework on and share with the Chargeheads, because I bet you is probably. Oh, hang on, shared. But what shared in what sense? Is it an app? We've got Believe around here, and I believe it or not, they're not working. So there we go.
I think there's a transition process in terms of what people want out of it. And I think certainly early adopters were very keen on the air quality and the environmental and the CO2 side of things. I think now we're moving into a market where the cost side of things is becoming a bigger and bigger motivator, a bit like the diesel stuff was 10 years ago. It's interesting with the kind of, the whole diesel thing was a CO2, and it was a green diesel thing. BMW, Audi, and Mercedes all used to offer a Euro 6 upgrade kit. Effectively, it was fitting the stuff that it used to fit in California. And you'd be able, it would be badged on the back of the Mercs. S-Class, E-Class used to be able to fit an AdBlue system to it. It'd make it Euro 6 compliant before it was a legal requirement. The take-up for it was tiny in the UK, because people didn't want to have to pay for the refueling it. They didn't understand really what it did, and it was just an extra 1,000-1,500 quid on top of the cost of the car. So the take up for it in a market which was quite supposedly kind of focused on green diesels, efficient diesels, low CO2, when you introduce something where there's an additional cost to kind of reducing the air quality impact, people weren't interested, which I think is quite, looking back on that now. So I think there's certainly an interest in EVs from a green point of view, but I think there's the financial side of it is a big motivator.
What about what came to my mind when you're talking about that was, remember the Rover Metros that had decat? What was the badge that used to be on the back? To show that it had a cat on it.
Just a catalyzer, didn't it? On the back.
Yeah.
Have one. A catalyst badge on the back. You used to say catalyst.
Really? Yeah, because I mean, I never saw that as really a bonus. I wonder how many people thought, "Oh, I must get that," because I suppose it's a very small percentage, isn't it, that people care about? Because most people couldn't give a rat's ass about the environment a lot of the time, because a lot of people think it's just, it's a bit like the difference between climate change and the emissions in cities. Now, climates do change, but obviously the human race, we are affecting it quite a bit at the moment with what we're putting out there. But a lot of people say, oh, actually, it's affecting it in a good way, because all the CO2 emissions means that we've got one of the greenest worlds in the world at the moment, greenest area in the world. But for me, my focus is pollution, So, yeah, I think every time I start my 3-litre V6 petrol camper van, I know about it. I can smell it a mile off. And I'm obviously a little bit sensitive to it. I don't know why, but in diesels as well, really annoys me. So having an electric car, when an electric car goes past, I'm just like, oh, that's nice. Just a car that I'm not going to smell. Do you know what I mean? I don't know about you guys. You kind of out fumes all the time.
But you hit the nail on the head there, though. You said it's just a car, and that's what it is. And this is what we kind of started this podcast for, is they're just cars. It doesn't really matter. The powertrain is not, it's still a car, no matter what the powertrain is. It doesn't need to be this polar, does it?
Polar.
Yeah. Polar.
Yeah.
Car.
Yeah, Alex has one of those old Polar Chargers which isn't connected, if anyone needs one.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should start locking that, otherwise I'm going to end up with all sorts of demand for it.
John's but I think the majority of the population are only motivated by the cost. Yeah, I completely agree with you. It will be the government that needs to move us to EV through incentives. I think it's just not even incentives anymore. I think it just needs to be the basic infrastructure. And I'm just going to keep beating that drum. Basic AC infrastructure. Because until they do, it's just rubbish, really. Apparently that new estate needs to be the base of the new future Chargeheads video. Well, I'm up for that. I was choking on fumes the other day, posted on Facebook. Bizarrely, I don't have an EV yet. Well, I didn't have a EV, and I had a Chargeheads channel before I even had an EV. So you can still be, positive and be passionate about having an EV and the EV transition without having an EV, as far as I'm concerned. And you might not drive your petrol that much. What does it cost? What cost, buddy? Geo Cracks? I've not heard from you before. What do you mean? What do you think he's talking about, guys?
Not sure.
My next good stuff, John. What are you looking at? What car are you looking at? What EV? Interested to know. What do we think John's going to go for? I think he's going to go for a Tesla.
Yeah.
He looked like it. I think
John, other brands are available.
Apparently.
They are. I know. I'm looking at a MG ZS at the moment to change our Mazda petrol auto, because you can pick them up for about $7,500 at the moment, like high mileage one, which seems, as a second car that does 120 miles, has CCS charging, and that battery degradation isn't that bad.
Mm.
And they've also fixed the software bugs with them now, because it used to have an issue if you had power line adapters in your house. But it would see your home charge as a rapid charger and not charge.
There we go, John. John's made the right decision. He's getting a Tesla Model 3 secondhand. You won't be disappointed, John.
Yeah.
These guys might be disappointed.
Yeah.
I can't really fault it. There's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with them at all. So
Just don't go near the chat lines with a pound coin. I say £4 coins.
£2 coins for mine, mate. Yeah, I always look down the rear. I always look down my passenger mirror, thinking that really doesn't line up. But I don't care because everything else about that car is just bang on. It is literally bang on because you could take any car and poke holes in it, especially old Polos. Secondhand prices are amazing at the moment. I'm interested, John. What did you go for? Long range, short range? I've been told off for saying short range before.
Standard range. You can't call them short range.
I know. I've been literally decimated on my channel before. And great news, guys. The Chargeheads UK overall channel is just about hit 5,000 subscribers. It might have done since we've been talking. Replying to Mike Allen about episode on the estate, asking about cost of charge. I asked him the same thing, Geocracks. We've still not got a price yet. Still waiting. He's gone for a long range. Good stuff. Well done, John. He's gone for the Chrome edition, the Fremont American special. I'm guessing so if you've gone for a used one. And what mileage and what price? Really interested on that. Yeah, I think I've kind of ranted. Sorry, guys. I have ranted a lot today, haven't I? I'm turning into Robert Llewellyn, aren't I? But like, not as entertaining.
Or the opposite of some other YouTube channels that may rant about EVs in a very different way.
Yeah, but I've ranted in a balanced way because I've said about how some things annoy me and how they could be better. I've not said that EVs are perfect and it's the only way and everyone can afford them. So
I think we're at a point now where the cars are becoming more affordable. You are getting some good usable, daily drivable EVs at a cost that's quite palatable for people who wouldn't be in the market for a new vehicle. You just have to make this is why the charging infrastructure, a balanced, useful charging infrastructure, especially the residential side, is important for sort of sweetening that deal, isn't it? And getting people into them. Otherwise, you're not getting the full benefit of owning one.
Yeah, but the only problem is I've only got £1,000 and I drive to Scotland every day in one go. So there's no EV for me. I live in Somerset, so I feel like some of the remote places I need to go to, they don't have the charge infrastructure. So long range, good choice. Great car. I'll buy a 2021 or newer, so I get the revised version. Yep, with a heat pump. I don't disagree with that. I don't live there. Watch Tim's video soon. I don't even know where it is. So obviously my dad will tell me about that another time. Thanks for watching, Dad. So yeah, I think we've come to a natural end, unless you guys want to add anything. Oh, we want to talk about the what EV deals are out there at the moment. There's loads out there. I think it's as simple as that. Loads. Have you guys seen any recently?
No, not really. There's no better.
Sorry, go on. Sorry, mate.
Time to buy one, is there? I don't think there's been a better time to buy an EV overall. I mean, it's you've got a great selection of vehicles that to suit not all budgets, but it's getting better all the time, isn't it? So
yeah, I mean, MG4 has got you've got the interest rates coming down on them now. I think I saw one 249 deposit, 249 a month on the middle range. The MG4 has got a bit complicated now because you've got the standard range, you've got the long range, you've got the extended range. So long range one, 249 at 2.9% APR. That's the interest rates on cars have come back down again to below what the Bank of England base rate is, isn't it?
And loads of cheap used EV out there, and I think that will probably increase a little bit with September. New plates, 74 plates, if anyone's seen them out there. So I reckon that there will be a load of cars hitting the used car market. So it depends on what BCA and the other auction houses do in terms of letting the cars out there. But I'm certainly looking for another car. My dad stepped in. Old Hyundai Ioniq 5 before the new one. I'm not sure what that means. I know that my dad's just about changed his ID3, but there's some cheap ID3s out there now. They start from like 12 grand. I say cheap, that's not really cheap, is it? But in comparison with a petrol auto of that same age and brand, it is cheaper, simply. But guys, we'll definitely make sure we've got some proper deals for you next week, some examples. So we've got a few more going in. You just bought a 2019 i3 for the missus for a decent price. Want one now for myself so I can mod it. Yes. Modify.
Actually, another deal I've seen is BYD Dolphin is about 249 with interest free. So 249 and interest free on the BYD Dolphin, and that's a 200-mile range car.
LFP battery as well, if you own it at the end. So, you know, double the battery cycles compared to an NMC battery, which is
and a lot of colours going on in the interior, if you like that sort of thing.
I sat in Kev KC Talks EV. I think that's his YouTube channel. I forget. I sat in one that he was on test. He's always blagging a car. And inside, it was a top spec one. It was lovely. It was really nice. And something about it, if you ever sit in one, the handles are just there. And it's just like a real easy operation. Very much unlike the outside of a Tesla Model 3 if you don't know how to open them. You just have to thumb it in. That's how the Tesla Model 3 works. And on that note, I think we'll leave it. So thanks everyone for taking part. Really appreciate all the comments. Kev, Alex, always good to have a chat. And we'll be here next week talking about something equally exciting and something to get me passionate and angry, no doubt. So there we go. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.